Closed captioning of this program is made possible by the Fireman's Fund Foundation.
The new legislative and congressional district maps released today promise to shake up politics in California. And the former leader of the Your Black Muslim Bakery is found guilty of murder in the shooting of Oakland journalist Chauncey Bailey. Apple's latest technology reaches a new height.
We're going to move the digital hub, the center of your digital life, into the cloud.
And Steve Jobs makes a surprise announcement about the company's plan for a futuristic expansion in Cupertino. Disturbing images stir up controversy over the circumcision ban on San Francisco's ballot. Coming up next. Good evening, I'm Belva Davis. Welcome to This Week in Northern California. Joining me on our news panel tonight are Rachel Gordon, City Hall reporter with the San Francisco Chronicle; Tom Vakar, consumer editor with KTVU News; and Thomas Peel, investigative reporter for Bay Area News Group and the Chauncey Bailey Project; and Carla Marinucci, San Francisco Chronicle's senior political editor. Carla, we're going to get to redistricting, is why you're invited here tonight. But first, we got to talk about the budget, because there have been talks going on all week.
Absolutely.
The deadline is right now.
That's right.
What's happened?
Next Wednesday, and this has been going on for months, June 15th, the constitutional deadline. And if these legislators don't get it together, they're going to be losing budget. No budget, no pay is what the voters said when they passed Prop 25. So they'll be losing $402 a day. That's going to add up. We think that may add a little fire to their passion to get the budget done this weekend, we hope. But still, nothing really new there. Jerry Brown's still wanting to extend these taxes, saying that it's necessary to close that $10 billion budget gap, and the Republicans holding firm on that. So we'll see how that works out.
If this redistricting commission has its way, there'll be different kinds of people in many of those seats up there making decisions the next time.
That's right.
Around.
You know, it's been described sort of as almost a game of musical chairs that was sort of unleashed today when these lines came out. Everybody was waiting for the California Redistricting Commission to put them out. As just a little background, if you all remember, Prop 11 back in 2008, California voters said, we want citizens to draw these lines. It's the first time the Citizens Commission has ever done this, and so they released it today. The assembly lines, the Senate, and the congressional lines. So all over the country, people were watching what could happen. A lot of analysis was taking place today, and sort of the general analysis is the Democrats stand to win or win back a sort of 3 to 5 potential seats in the congressional, and maybe 1 in the Senate and 1 in the Assembly. It's interesting to see. This was a process done with a lot of input, meetings all over the state, communities. The big issue, they wanted to sort of undo all that gerrymandering and those weird squiggly lines of all the districts that politicians so beautifully set up 10 years ago. And they wanted to have a fair process that didn't have the politics and yet kept intact ethnic communities so they wouldn't be disenfranchised. The Voter Rights Act, that was important. So what happened today? Well, we saw some changes in San Francisco, where San Francisco was melded into 1 Senate district instead of 2, setting up a potential battle ahead between Mark Leno and Leland Yee. That's an interesting one.
But the other big news was that, I believe, what happened down in Fremont, down in the South.
In Fremont is a good example, Belva, of ethnic communities that really participated in this process. The Indian American community, the South Asian community, that's Pakistanis, Afghans, Indians, Vietnamese, really participated in this process, and yet their community, one of the fastest growing Indian communities in the country, if not the largest, was split in half down in the South Bay. They're very upset about that. This is just one of the places where these are not final lines, and these are draft lines, and there's going to be a whole group of meetings still. People can still weigh in this process.
So,
people think that could be changed.
Carla, with the changing demographics of California, we know there's a large increase of Latino voters and residents in California, but is it still a state of identity politics? I mean, does it make a difference if all the Indians are kept together in the Fremont area, or the Latinos in San Jose, or the Chinese in San Francisco?
Yeah, the idea isn't to sort of create special district, but not to split up a voice and a vote. And this has been done in the past to, say, Latino communities split 3 or 4 ways, and they don't get the representation.
But I'm just wondering, is it about ethnic politics, or is it issues?
No,
or is it change? Is that melding?
People on both sides of this commission, Republicans and Democrats, gave them a lot of marks for saying they really did this process fairly. They looked at all the considerations and all the citizen input in as many places as possible. One of the commissioners to me described it as just a jigsaw puzzle that you had to put together without any boundaries, or I mean, very complicated. But the fact is, most people think in most places they did a pretty good job. Northern California really doesn't get too much dramatic overhaul, except in a couple of districts which we can talk about. It's Southern California, LA area, where there's a bunch of Republicans down there that look like they're going to be losing their seats
or having contested races.
Yes, and that's sort of the key. In a lot of these places, Democrats now are going to have to go outside their comfort zone and take in suburban voters, more whiter communities, more upscale communities that maybe don't always vote with them. Case in point, Lynn Woolsey's district now goes all the way up the coast. She's very upset about it, all the way up the coast.
Now that's Marin-Sonoma.
Yeah, Marin-Sonoma, except now it extends all the way up the coast, which now takes in some rural areas and much more conservative areas. She'll have to be more moderate.
So it's just now about the crab community.
Yeah,
right?
Let me ask one quick question.
Yeah.
This is the question, is this. As fair as the parties say that it is, does it not really further solidify the Democrats and the Republicans kind of holding on to their strongholds to the exclusion of any third-party movement? Does this really make the two-party system just even more solid?
No, I think what a lot of people think is it's going to make a lot of these legislators move more toward the center. When you have a district, for instance, Jerry McNerney's district now extends more to the Central Valley, more towards Stockton. They're going to have to appeal to different groups than they traditionally do now. And a lot of people think when you go to the budget, this is something that could affect a lot of these legislators. Dan Lundgren, for instance, whose district looks to be gone. David Dreier. There's a lot of people, of course, they're Congress, but when you're talking about state legislators, they're looking at this and saying they're going to have to compromise now much more than they were in the past.
Well, these are pretty firm lines, but still there's a lot of room for talk.
That's right.
Coming up, and they won't issue their final decision until when?
That's right. Another set of public hearings in June. The next set of maps is July 7th, and the final deadline is August 15th.
And for more on redistricting, you can listen to Forum on KQED Public Radio Monday morning at 9:30. Well, Thomas Peel, we have been waiting a long time, since sometime in late May, for the jury in the Chauncey Bailey trial to decide the fate of the defendants. Can you give us a little bit of a background scope on what happened?
We remember that Chauncey Bailey was walking to work the morning of August 2nd, 2007. He was shot down in Oakland, a couple blocks from his office at the Oakland Post. There were 2 other murders in July around the bakery, a man named Michael Wills and a man named Odell Roberson. Those were open cases. Bailey, we remember there was a very fast arrest. Police were raiding the bakery, found a young man named Devondre Broussard, had a shotgun, threw it out the window, gave what now turns out to be a flawed confession to police about 12 hours later, 15 hours later. He was in jail for a long time. He was kind of waited out and decided he didn't want to go to prison for life, and he had some information for the police, and that really kind of came to the crux of the jury's decision yesterday when the leader of the bakery, Yusuf Bey IV, and another young man, Antoine Mackey, were convicted of multiple murders. Bey IV was finally convicted of ordering Chauncey Bailey killed. Antoine Mackey, who was long suspected of being the getaway driver in that killing, was convicted. Bay IV was also convicted of ordering Wills killed. Mackey did the shooting there. Ordering Roberson killed. Broussard had admitted that killing. It was a question of the order. Mackey was, the jury hung on the charge of whether Mackey was Broussard's accomplice on the Roberson killing.
Tom, with this conviction, the Bay family has been a presence in Oakland for a long, long time, including the elder Bay, who was charged or at least thought of, suspected of much wrongdoing there. Does this end sort of the Bay presence? Are there other interests, business interests, or family members?
You know, the family is kind of fragmented, and Bay IV has some younger brothers, 4 younger brothers who were in and out of court throughout the trial. There were some problems with some witness tampering or some witness intimidation and other things. But there are other people out there, followers who were at the bakery who aren't necessarily on the bloodline. For instance, Josh Richmond, who's your frequent guest here at Belford, received a death threat from one of those people who was at the bakery about 6 weeks ago. He was working on a story about some real estate fraud, kind of the classic thing that went on there, and the way they propped up their finances. And he gets this telephone call, and the guy says, "You write that story, you're going to end up like your friend Chauncey."
Thomas, it seems that the prosecution got murder convictions, which is what they want. Is there anything they didn't get in this trial? Are there was jury hung on anything? Were there?
I hung on this one charge of whether Antoine Mackey was Devondre Broussard's accomplice in the killing of Odell Roberson.
So prosecutors walked away from this.
Yeah,
very
they
pleased.
did. They did. They absolutely did. District Attorney Nancy O'Malley had a press conference yesterday and said just that. She was incredibly pleased by the outcome of this. So was the courtroom prosecutor, Melissa Crum. And they spoke.
And probably a lot of journalists as well.
Yeah, and you know, and both O'Malley and Crum yesterday spoke to the First Amendment impact of what this killing was. And
because Chauncey Bailey was the first American journalist to be killed in the line of duty, so to speak.
Sure.
For decades.
Since 1976, the first first reporter in the United States killed on a domestic story since Don Bowles in 1976.
That being said, what was the mood like in the courtroom and after, before and after, outside in the hallways? I mean, could you feel this kind of,
Yeah, Tom, there was tension there, and it wasn't necessarily the verdict itself. It was because the jury had sent a note down and said, "Hey, we're ready to go," and then 15 minutes later they sent a note down and said, "Oh, we're not, and we have a question." And it kind of went back and forth, and the courtroom was packed, and the courtroom has been locked when the jury is present. There's no in and out for the last couple of months because of some issues, and people. Yusuf Bey IV's mother got back too late and couldn't get in the courtroom, so that added to some tension to it.
Any feelings of intimidation or anything like that?
You know, there were during the trial, there were some witnesses who were very, very shaken up, and there were some people who just did not want to testify. One guy, I think I noted, said 50 times he couldn't remember things.
What was the feeling from the Bay family? I mean,
we didn't get much of a response from the Bay family. Bay IV's lawyer, Gene Peretti, said his client was stunned by the outcome. At least on the Bailey killing, I think he might have been the only person who felt that way, because there was a lot of evidence that he had ordered this hit, that he was the intellectual author of this murder.
Can you just remind us what it was that Chauncey was looking at with his family?
Sure.
Why do they want to kill him?
Well, the bakery went into bankruptcy in October of 2006. As we all know, a matter of public record. There was no secret here. Bay IV had run the bakery into the ground. His brother, Yusuf Bey V, in a separate trial testified that IV couldn't even wrap the bread right. There were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They weren't paying payroll taxes. They had creditors who were not messing around. They wanted to foreclose on that building and get their money back for unpaid loans. He was appealing to people like Ron Dellums. Hey, help me. Help us here. He went to Barbara Lee and actually had a follower or a family friend on Lee's staff who got a letter written very quickly on Lee's letterhead. He somehow thought that Bailey's story was going to be this big revelation that was going to make the Oakland power structure pull away from him and not help him try to find a way to stave off this pending liquidation of the building.
well, it's the end of a long trial. We didn't mention the work of journalists in bringing about justice here, the Chauncey Bailey Project, for which you were a member of. But we are at a point, do we know if there will be appeals yet?
There'll certainly be appeals in this case, Belva. I think there'll be years of appeals. Antoine Mackey, the co-defendant, his lawyer, Gary Serbu, has had standing objections throughout the trial. He wanted the trial severed. He thinks Mr. Mackey was, or says that Mr. Mackey was the victim of guilt by association, because there were all these other matters at the bakery that came into the trial before Mackey was there. So we're looking for a robust appeal there.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, we're talking about something coming to an end. Tom, you're talking about all kinds of new things happening in the sky, or in things that look like they belong in the sky. This goes to the Apple story. Apple had some surprising news for us this week.
3 stories this week, and what's really fascinating about it is we have to not forget this is one of the most important companies on the planet Earth now. 20 years ago, it was on life support. This company is a trademark known in every corner of the world, and it just keeps growing and growing and getting stronger and stronger. One story that came out in the middle of the week was that Mr. Jobs wants to put together a new headquarters. A headquarters so large that it's 3.1 million square feet. That's putting 72 acres under a roof. 72 acres. It'll be in the form of a giant circle, where they're calling it the spaceship or the flying saucer.
Was it designed by Star Wars people?
I don't know who designed it, but it is a remarkable thing, and it is going to be one of the great corporate headquarters on the planet. I mean, it is of that magnitude. It's going to be right there in Cupertino, and the mayor of Cupertino, Gilbert Wong, said there is no chance we're going to say no. This is going to happen. It will open by about 2015. Now, they've got some other approvals to go through, but the chance that this won't happen and that this important company won't stay right there where it began in Cupertino are zero. It's going to be there.
But will it mean American jobs? That's the thing that,
Well,
I mean, isn't that one of the issues when it comes to
Well, earlier today, I covered the story of the Black Economic Forum that actually did a protest with quite a few people out in front of the Apple store on Stockton and Market. And what they're saying is there's a problem here. They're saying that Apple Computer, Apple no longer calls itself a computer, but Apple, as important as it is, employs about 50,000 Americans, and directly or indirectly employs about 1 million Chinese. And these folks are saying, look, you need to do more with minorities. You need to help them get educated so that they can have some of these good jobs, and you need to bring more jobs to the United States. Apple's response is, look, we're building these retail stores all over the place. They're our stores. These are our employees. We are doing the applications thing, the programming things where you can make applications, and that's creating hundreds, if not thousands, of companies that are doing that right here in the United States. So there is some concern about that, but that protest took place today. While all of that is going on, this week the Apple folks gathered, the programmers and the application makers gathered at Moscone Center. And Mr. Jobs announced that from now on you won't have to plug every device into your computer in order to, let's say, transfer music or transfer documents or do this or that. You won't have to do any of this plugging in anymore. Everything is going to go up to a cloud, which is in effect a massive server farm back east where, let's say you record a tune on your iPhone, or you create a document on your Macintosh computer, or you take a picture with your iPad 2. All of this stuff automatically, if you order it, will simply just go up into the sky wirelessly, and it will come down to all of your devices wirelessly, automatically, without you thinking a thing. This is called the iCloud. Now, we've had clouds around for a long time. Email kind of works in a cloud. You send it off into the sky somewhere, and then somebody else can retrieve it, you know, from the sky and all of that. But this is going to be much more ubiquitous, and this kind of programming is so advanced that what Apple is counting on, and rightfully so, is that millions more people will be drawn to its devices as opposed to PCs, as it makes this frontal assault on Microsoft, that the likes of which it has never seen. Apple is certainly one of the most important companies in the world.
So you talk about it being an important company, and 20 years ago was what was going to happen to it, and so much of it seems to be predicated on its leader, its CEO. We know he's had his health problems. Is Apple now separate from Steve Jobs? Can it go on if he's not there anymore?
There's no question that the other people that are in the high ranks there are tremendously smart people, and they think very much like Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is, however, kind of the Babe Ruth of technology. There's only one. He's the Muhammad Ali of technology. There's just only one. And if at some point in time he decides to cut the cord with Apple, it is going to have some sort of an impact on it. But nobody can deny the fact that at the second level of that company, all the way down to the very basement of the place, there are very smart people there. doing incredible work, and when you have a good idea, they make it come to life, and that is a pretty remarkable thing. And sometimes they make it come to life late. For example, they didn't invent telephones. They just made them better than anybody else ever thought about doing. So
listen, we got an Apple guy here. We can tell that, who's enthusiastic about all this. But what does it mean for jobs here?
what it means for jobs ultimately is this, that if the app business takes off even more than it does, then there are going to be more American jobs for people who know how to do programming. If, for example, they can get more robotics into their manufacturing, there could be Apple factories here in the United States.
How many people will it take to fill the spaceship?
Yeah.
One fourth of Apple's employees, 12,000 people will be in that building. That is a big building.
Let me ask you very quickly, though, about getting people to fill those positions. We're seeing what's happening to the California public school system, at least, from the grade schools up through the universities. You need people who know how to do these programming and programs. Is Apple committed to philanthropic work to help the educators educate the next workforce?
Not to the degree that, let's say, Bill Gates is. But the reality is that's what the Black Economic Forum was saying today. You need to take some of these billions of dollars of cash that you have and start educating people, start doing that, and that's going to be a real challenge for Apple.
Tom,
Well, we have to move to quite a different kind of topic. Something that will be on the San Francisco ballot comes up in this next round.
Let me see if I could tie this together.
Yeah, tie it together.
But I'm not going to. I mean, this is one of those only in San Francisco, first of its kind in the country. San Francisco voters, as you said, are going to go to the ballot in November and decide whether they should ban circumcision. That's going to be if you are a parent or a guardian of a male under the age of 18, you get him circumcised. You face up to a year in jail. You face up to a $1,000 fine. You have a misdemeanor on your record. Now, this is something that they call themselves the inactivists. The inactivist activists have been pushing for a couple of decades, saying that circumcision, they're saying, is genital mutilation, that you shouldn't impose this on a baby. If you want to get circumcised, you should be able to do it if you want, but you should be an adult to be able to make that decision. It is something that they've tried to get on the ballot in Santa Monica. They pulled back on that. Massachusetts state legislature looked at it. They said, no, San Francisco, it's on the ballot, not by the Board of Supervisors or by the mayor, but by signature petition. They collected more than 7,000 signatures to put this before voters. Now, there are a couple of very key issues here. The big one, where almost everyone's saying it's going to get tossed out if it is indeed passed, is First Amendment grounds, because it doesn't have any exceptions for religious purposes. Jews and the Muslim communities have done circumcisions for centuries, if not thousands of years. I need to figure that out, go in my history books there. And they're saying, look, you can't impose this on us. You can't say we can't do something that we've done for generations and generations.
Well, but you can also say that, there are religions over history that believed in human sacrifice. Can't do that here. And, there's got to be probably some sort of middle ground. But it would strike me, though, that they're going to have problems on religious grounds, because this isn't killing somebody. This is doing something to alter their body, but it certainly is something that's going to be looked at very closely on constitutional grounds.
Isn't the issue in this measure the literature that this group has used to push their position? The comic book involved, which was shown at the beginning of the show, Foreskin Man, contains images that really, to be honest, look right out of the Third Reich. I mean, it's caused some concern among the Jewish community.
So Foreskin Man is a very Aryan-looking guy, and it's Monster Moyle, the Orthodox Jewish person who performs circumcisions, is in there, and they're going, we didn't really mean it to be that, but yeah, we kind of did mean it to be that. We just wanted to get people's attention, and indeed they did. And that's one of the reasons, actually, from those comic books, Foreskin Man comic books, that Santa Monica pulled out, saying, look, we want to do this as kind of a personal choice thing. We don't want to do it as looking like we're anti-Semitic, which a lot of people are saying that's exactly what it is.
But isn't the main group who introduced this legislation denying connection with the people who have done the comic book?
Yeah, they are, but I think they had it up on their website of doing this, and it's been out there, so you can deny it, but there's definitely been that connection.
Do they have any public health argument on this?
There is some public health argument. The Centers for Disease Control in the United States has not taken a position on it, but there have been studies in Africa that have shown that circumcised males there's a decreased chance of transmitting AIDS and HIV with that. There's also some studies that show that there's a reduced chance of urinary tract infection if you're circumcised. In the United States, it's very widespread practice. About 80% of the males are circumcised. Worldwide, it's 30%. it's going to be interesting to see, one, how did it get on the ballot in San Francisco? Some people say you could get anything on the ballot in this town. It is something different. Let's be frank, you have something about penises that's going to get some traction in San Francisco most likely. And, you know, it is going to be decided by the voters. The public officials have been pretty silent on it, though.
I was going to ask, were any of the mayoral candidates talking about it?
Not yet, but I don't know if we're going to have a debate just on that.
In a town that is so concerned, you know, concerns about human rights and issues and image, etc., are usually so at the forefront. Nobody spoke up about
You know, I mean, I think we can
except
come
for Mark Leno.
Right. Mark Leno was one person who happened to be, he was studying rabbinical school before he got into business and politics there. And I don't want to make light of this, but I think a lot of politicians don't really want to touch anything to have to do with genitals, with penises, with a 10-foot pole. I mean, we just saw what's happening with Representative Weiner with that thing. I think it's, whether it's a serious subject or not.
Other conversation.
No, but it's a serious. It is a serious subject and a lot of serious issues. But it's also something that people are going to make fun of San Francisco.
Well, this has been a very interesting evening, and my thanks to all of you for joining me here tonight. Well, and there is more at kqed.org/thisweek, where you can watch past episodes, subscribe to our newsletter and our podcast, and share your thoughts about the program. I'm Belva Davis. Good night.